going to spend some time coming up with D. Orlando Ledbetter coming up about Julio Jones, Calvin Ridley, Kyle Flood, Sark, the Atlanta Falcons. I reached out to some of my Atlanta friends, and I said, I want to learn more about Sark. I want to learn more about Kyle Flood, and I want to talk more about Calvin Ridley and Julio Jones and what they've been able to do in Atlanta. We'll talk about the needs going into the NFL draft. And they said, you got to reach out to D. Orlando Ledbetter. He's the Atlanta Falcons beat reporter for the AJC. D. Orlando Ledbetter, welcome back to Tuscaloosa. I hope you're doing well, sir.
I'm doing great, Ryan. Thanks for the introduction, and glad to come on your show today.
Yeah, absolutely. And certainly we keep an eye on your work, and I know you're big friends with Gary Harris, which is on our morning show. And I hear you guys very often talking about the Falcons, and I wanted to reach out to you. Help me understand what Sark's relationship was there, and maybe the job, maybe the grade that you would give him in the 2 years that he spent there in Atlanta.
Yeah, he was one who hadn't been in the program game for quite a while. He had been back with Oakland for 1 year, and was named the offensive coordinator, handed the number one offense in the league coming off of a Super Bowl, and wasn't able to, at least stay in the neighborhood. Everybody wasn't expecting him to, take it higher, but at least, keep it on the path that it was on, or as an elite unit. And they weren't able to do it. They got back to the playoffs. And then this year, things collapsed when the offensive line got old. So, he did about as best he could. I give him a C plus here for a first-time NFL signal caller.
Okay. So now you tie it back to the offensive line. What went wrong with the offensive line?
They got old. The right tackle all of a sudden couldn't block anybody. Ryan Strader. They had a musical chair operation at left guard and right guard. They started 6 different guard combinations last season, so gave up 42 sacks and a career high 108 quarterback hits on Matt Ryan last year, and they were the 31st ranked offense against stuff runs. That's runs of 0 yards or less. And they were 31st on those. So, really no consistency under Sarkisian last year.
All right, when you look at Sark, how would you describe his philosophy? And certainly it'll be much different than the college game, but the NFL game certainly is much different. I mean, the parity in that league it's so thin. The thin margin between a victory and a loss is so much in the NFL that I watch. And, I love the NFL, but it just so – there's not a lot of margin of error when you talk about the National Football League.
Yeah, and Sark will try to spread people out and get mismatches. He really likes to get that linebacker on running back mismatch. That was big money for him with Devontae Freeman and Tevin Coleman. And Shanahan did that very well too. But spreading them out, throwing to the back, running double move routes when you need to hit people over the top. It's a jet sweeps and all that kind of stuff. Good looking stuff for the college rank. I think it's going to be just fine. But a jet sweep on the 4-yard line against New England got blown up. It just didn't look good. You can't really trick NFL players, whereas in college you can get them with some motion.
D. Orlando Ledbetter right now from the AJC joining us here. Let's go back to Kyle Flood. What can you tell us about him? He's going to be coming here coaching the offensive line here in Tuscaloosa.
Yeah, he was kind of a quiet guy, assistant line coach here, just kind of doing this thing. We didn't get to talk with him much, but we certainly knew about his background, the problems he had at Rutgers. But you don't really get to know the assistant line coach much. I did see him working with Chris Morgan in unison, and they seem to be, a pretty good lockstep with each other. The unit was, I think was well coached. I think it was just a talent issue with them last year. He certainly did a good job with the unit that went to the Super Bowl. So I think Chris can coach and learn some from Coach Flood, who had head coaching experience.
D. Orlando Ledbetter, you've been a part of this game that we love so much. Where does Julio Jones rank on the players that you've witnessed when we talk about the all-time greats?
Well, I covered the Bengals, Packers, and now the Falcons. And the Bengals had, Boomer Esiason and that whole crew. But no really like first ballot Hall of Famer other than Tony Munoz, the left tackle. And that's, you were certainly marveled at
Sure.
the work he did. And in Green Bay, it was Brett Favre and another one for Reggie White, of course. And then Sterling Sharp was on the path to be what Julio's doing right now. That's who I most compare Julio to. Sterling was the first guy to get 100 catches every year when, it was really hard to get 100 catches. And unfortunately, he had the neck injury and ended his career a little short. So, but Julio's doing what Sterling Sharp kind of started as that power big receiver. I put Rice in that kind of leaner James Lofton, Charlie Joyner group of receivers. So those are two different kind of deep ball receivers.
Do you think he'll get the money that he's wanting there in Atlanta?
They don't have it on the books right now, so I'm just kind of sitting back and watching how they're going to manage this cap, who's going to cut, can they get some contracts redone, move some money into signing bonuses, because to do that, it's a pretty high-end roster, and to get Julio and Grady Jarrett done, they're going to have to get creative. Maybe leave enough money to add a guard in free agency, a guard or two. But yeah, they have to get creative here the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, what type of money you think that he will demand? I mean, what type of money are we looking at?
Well, the top spot I think is $20 million a year, $18 million a year. But I mean, the thing is years. How many years do you give it to him? I mean, he's getting ready to turn 30. You do a 6-year deal with him, but I mean, he just came back real early on a 5-year deal you did. So, I mean, you got to get his word that, this is going to be the last deal if you're going to go out to the 6 years, or if you're just going to give him some more money for the next couple of years, that would probably be a prudent move.
Yeah, when you look at Julio Jones, and I don't know if you've ever had these conversations with him, but there's some talk that he may be one of those guys that hits the early retirement a little bit sooner maybe than what some people think. Where do you stand on that?
I don't think so. I mean, I talked to him, he talked about playing for a long time and keeping himself in top shape. He watches what he eats. He's very meticulous about his diet and things he puts in his body and how he warms up, prepares. And he learned that from Tony Gonzalez. And I think Tony went to about 35. So I think Julio plans to at least do that.
Let me ask you about Calvin Ridley. Did he meet your expectations going into the 2018 season?
I think he exceeded them. He came advertised as an exquisite route runner. He showed that, especially with his ability to get deep on double moves. And, he scored 10 touchdowns. That was good for him. He did have a couple untimely drops, but that was a problem they knew he had at Alabama. So he could take care of those drops and keep improving. I think he'll be a number 2 for sure, and maybe a number 1 receiver before he gets done playing in the National Football League.
When you look at the NFL draft coming up for Atlanta, what do you think they target with that number 1 pick? Where do you think they go?
It's either D-line or interior lineman, but do you take a guard at 14? Do you take, I know they would love if Jonah Williams was there at 14, but I see him as high as 4 and as low as 20, so we'll see. But yeah, they could take a guard or a defender. A couple of those Clemson defensive linemen will be available around 14, Lawrence, maybe Christian Wilkins, and they'll be tempted to take one of those guys too.
Yeah, it's always a lot of fun. I don't know about you, but I enjoy watching the free agency. Yeah, I mean, I love the season. Don't get me wrong. But I'm a little bit jealous when the NFL, they get a lot of the publicity around the draft and the free agency. Now, we cover the college game. We got 15 practices starting on Friday with Nick Saban leading into April the 13th, the spring game. And I know you got that in Atlanta as well when you talk about the Dogs up in Athens. But you look at the free agency. Do you enjoy that? Because I know I do. I love following it around like the dominoes that begin to fall around the NFL.
Yeah, no question about it. But I think over time it's shown that nobody really wins the Super Bowl in the off season. But it's interesting. Free agency is kind of overhyped. The draft the draft's a lot different. That's worth the hype and a good high point of the off season. In free agency now, because teams tag the players they want, you're pretty much getting somebody that another team didn't want. So, I don't get that excited about free agency as I used to when like Reggie White and big name players were actually going to be free agents. I mean, the big free agents last year was Kirk Cousins. I didn't really get moved by that.
D. Orlando Ledbetter, how long have you been covering the game?
Well, I first started covering the Bengals in the 80s. That would have been 88, 89, that Super Bowl team that lost to Jerry Rice in Montana, and then through the 90s in Green Bay, and then Atlanta here since 05.
Okay. I knew that you'd been around quite a bit. AJC, Atlanta Falcons beat writer D. Orlando Ledbetter, thank you for loaning us your expertise here in Tuscaloosa. I really appreciate the conversation. Thank you for being a part of the show.
Sure, Ryan. Thanks for having me. It was my pleasure. You take care.